And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. Today, let's talk about how to keep good employees happy. Now, whenever I say that, you probably, kind of like me when I first read that title, said, yeah, right, Justin, that's impossible. But notice that we put the word good employees in there. We're not talking about B and C players here. We're talking about your A players. How do we keep your A players happy? Right? Because B and C players, they're there and we're going to have them on our team, but we really, if they were to leave, we can replace them. And I hate to say that with almost like a negativity or almost like this ivory tower type conjecture, but that's the reality of the situation. In every one of our businesses, we have those players to which we cannot lose them. We cannot lose them. We have to have them pulling at the same rate to which we're pulling, or else the business will drastically suffer. We all would agree that one of the most rewarding aspects and probably the most frustrating aspects of having a business is working with people. And assembling a team of people with varying different personalities and different skill sets, it's a challenge. It's challenging. Now, to me, I love building a team. I love seeing how the team meshes. And whenever turmoil or cultural issues arise, then trying to figure a solution around that while keeping the team motivated it's a little bit of a challenge, but it's something that I find myself enjoying. One of the problems, though, that we have in complicating the matter of keeping good employees happy is this. As business owners, more than likely, I know I do, we have the personality of a driver. We're already in the future. We can see where the business is headed tomorrow, and our minds are already there. And it's like we get sucked back in a vortex, like a time machine back to the present to deal with circumstances, the nitty gritty, the complaining, the backbiting, the infighting. And you and I are probably not experts in HR, and we're definitely not that handily in the touchy-feely things of business. No, we're drivers. We're the entrepreneurs. We're the business owners. We can see where we're going, and we just want people to jump on board. If we're truthful about how we view employees or how we view our business, we can almost all shake our heads to that. But we do realize that we have to have employees. We have to have good people, a good core group of employees that are aligned with us, that are driving the direction of the business forward. So as we think through how we're going to keep our good employees happy, our A players happy, we have to realize that right now we have a growing challenge. Man, it's a growing challenge. I'm sitting with business owners. I meet business owners once a week in a round robin meeting. So, for example, yesterday, I think I had 7, 8, or 9 meetings. I can't remember how many meetings with business owners I had just yesterday. And in every one of those meetings, every single meeting, the main thesis, the main struggle was the voluntary turnover that is happening at this point. Right now, according to Gartner.com or Gartner Incorporated, we're seeing a 20% increase over the pre-pandemic levels in voluntary turnover. Now, there's a myriad of reasons for that, but we're seeing nonetheless a voluntary turnover. With a 20% increase, we're seeing turnover rates in some micro markets of the U.S. as high as 24-25%. So, for example, a workforce of 25,000 employees need to prepare for an additional 1,000 voluntary departures. Let's take it a different approach. If you have 10 employees in your company, look at your 10 employees, and more than likely you're going to have 2 to 3 voluntary departures in the near future. That is highly disruptive for us as business owners. We were talking with one particular client that over a period of the last roughly 38 months have had 14 voluntary departures. Now, some may argue that that's a cultural issue. It could be, and it probably is. Some may argue it's a comp issue. It could be, and it probably is. But nonetheless, we're dealing with this current flight or fight type thing to where employees, good employees, are moving at a rate of about 20%, 25%. So if that in mind, we have to now start thinking about how we're going to retain our A players. How are we going to incentivize? How are we going to motivate? How are we going to create the culture to which our A players desire to stay? We're talking about employees, but let's be honest. 94% of executives whose work can be done remotely right now want to work at least one day a week remotely. I'm there. I was just telling the team that next year I want to have all of my customer, my particular client meetings. I work with just a handful of clients at this point in my career. I want to have all of them digital for a 90-day period where I'm actually not having to come to a physical location. Everything can be done with me in transit. And that's where we're seeing many executives right now. Well, if the executives are there, so are the employees. With COVID, we actually opened up this transient type of workforce. We opened up this idea that, hey, we don't have to be in one location. We don't have to be on site. We can be decentralized. Now, there was a study done by Gartner that said out of the 3,500 employees surveyed that there has been a destigmatization. I don't like that word, but basically before COVID, there was a stigma about working remotely. Now it's not there. And so now employees are trying to figure out how can they work remotely. Now, with that whole movement of trying to suffice and keep our employees happy, we also still have productivity and profitability metrics that we're having to deal with. So as we look into our employees, we realize that we have a flight risk that are happening right now. We have this remote work stigma or destigmatization that's happening right now. And then we have to go into the 5 basics of where the demographics of employees are playing. So you have 5 basic demographics of employees. You have the traditional employee, and they're more interested in a competitive compensation package, perks, good title, status, career advancement. That's your traditional employee. Second, you have a DIY style employee, and these typically range from the age of 25 to 45 years of age, and they value autonomy, flexibility, compensation, and meaningful work. You'll see the DIY type wanting to work remotely more than in office type settings or in location type settings. You have the double duty employees, and you see so many people being caregivers. Maybe it's to their children or to their elderly parents. And their double duty is taking them into almost like a dual mindset where when they're at work, but when they're not available. So you have various types of employees right now as we're trying to wrestle this. And then we have employees that want to work on their schedule. Now, when we look at it, we can see that we have idealistic employees, you and I. We say, okay, here are the employees that we want to hire. Maybe there's an age demographic for your particular product or service. Maybe there's a flexibility component. Maybe there's a career component. Maybe there's an advancement. Maybe it's the quality of work. Maybe it's community entanglement. You particularly have this idealistic employee. Simultaneously, you may be looking at your employee force and realize that you have sunsetter type employees. These are employees that are in their last stretch. You may have them for another 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. They have this idea that, hey, I'm already checked out. I'm already ready to retire. We see the sunsetter type of employees. And many times if we're trying to grow the value of our company, we really don't want to hire the sunsetter type of employee. We want our ideal employee. So as we drive into this, how do we retain our good employees? We have to realize that we're dealing with some things today that owners of yesterday might not have had to deal with to the same level. This transient workforce, remote workforce, the aging population, the turnover, the voluntary flight. Right now, as one client yesterday said, employees are very empowered at this particular point. So that leads us to the question, how do we retain our top employees? How do we retain the employees that we need to drive the company forward to the goals that has been set forth? Let's dissect that into a couple of different parts. The first thing we can do is we can invest in our employee engagement. Whenever I read employee engagement for the first time, I had to be honest with you. What does that mean? That's where my mind went. Well, what exactly is employee engagement? It's engaging employees to where they feel like they're a fundamental part of the company. They feel like they have ownership. Maybe they physically do have ownership. I know in our company, we're trying to move it to 100% employee owned. So maybe they physically do have ownership in the employees. They understand where the company is going. They understand what the company's values are, where the company's mission is. They understand how they fit into the bigger machine of the company. That is employee engagement. Now, in 2020, amidst COVID, Deloitte did a study, and they found that 15% improvement in employee engagement could lead to 2% increase in profit margin. Let me say that again. Deloitte, big masterful company in terms of business advisors, In 2020, in the midst of COVID, found that if we just increase improvement, if we give a 15% improvement in employee engagement, it could lead us to a 2% increase in profit margins. Friends, 2% in profit margins. So if you're at a 20% profit margin, you're moving up 22%. That is monumental. Again, I go back to what I said in the intro. We business owners have a hard time because employee engagement is a soft, touchy-feely thing, right? It really doesn't necessarily, quote, lead to bottom line dollars. All touche. It's actually the total opposite. If we can invest and get our employees engaged properly, we can lead to a 2% profit margin increase. There's many reasons for that. It's because of efficiency. It's because of productivity. It's because if the employees have ownership mentality, they're looking for ways on how to decrease and improve throughput. As we're looking at employee engagement, some things have come about to where we're now offering things like unlimited vacation, modern offices, even free food. I remember years ago, it's been some 15 years ago, I was working with a business owner and they were having a high turnover rate in this business. It was an auto repair company. And one of the recommendations I had, and they looked at me like a calf looking at a new gate. I mean, it was funny. I said, guys, I'm just going to recommend something. Every single day, feed your employees. Bring them lunch. Have a Thanksgiving style lunch. Now, these were people, men and women, who had grease underneath their fingernails from working on cars all day. What happened with that simple, not expensive, little bit of consideration move was the employee turnover rate went to 0. Now it became a point where people wanted to be there. You brought the team together in camaraderie. It was very impressive. So you can do something like that. There may be some daily actions you can take very similar to that. You could do employee surveys. You could give feedback, one-on-one meetings, just saying, hey, I hear you're doing great. You can give encouraging. One of the things I love to do is I love to drop little lines to our team. If I'm in office, I'll walk in and just, sit down and just talk. Just, hey, talk to me. 5 minutes out of my day. What's going on? How's life? How's family? What can I help you with? What can I do for you? Just little encouraging things. If they're not remote, if they're not local, then you can send them a little message through a text message, maybe an in-office IM messaging system, maybe an email. Maybe you can send something that they just did really good. You can say, hey, you're a superstar. I want to thank you for all you're doing. We've all loved to be encouraged. It's little daily actions we can take. You can provide progress updates. Hey, we were here in this particular process. Now, hey, we've moved it to this particular point. We've moved the ball this far. We're 80% to our goal. Just progress updates. So employees love engagement. They love engagement. They also love professional development. In a 2021 State of Skills report by Degree, 46% of workers said they are more likely to leave a company that doesn't commit to their professional development. Think about that. If you're not committing to your A players movement and development, there's a 46% chance saying that your A players will leave. That's pretty powerful. As business owners, that should drive us to the point where we're really considering what we're doing. You could do things like tuition reimbursement programs. If you don't know about those, hey, reach out to your HR department. There's many programs that you can employ within your company. You can create collaborative learning. You can create external courses, access to external courses. You can build a professional development system no matter what industry you're in. The third thing that A players want is they want recognition. It's not always about the dollars. Now, don't get me wrong. You've got to pay your competitive salary. You do. You cannot expect to maintain A players if they're not compensatedly motivated and if their salary's at a below market price. Can't do it. It's not going to happen. Not in today's environment. One thing you can do in addition to that to help maintain that continuity of your employee field, especially your A players, is recognize. Internal recognition has a strong influence, and it does improve employee retention. My dad, we call him Pops, as you may know, listening to the episodes. Pops worked for the Georgia Port Authority for over 20 years. Now, the Georgia Port Authority is a private company, and state deals with some regulations there with it. But basically, they ship and export, import various things like paper, grain, corn, cars, various things around the state of Georgia. There's 3 big major ports in the state of Georgia. And while he was working there, on certain monumental anniversaries, the company would do things. I can remember when he hit his 20th anniversary, he got a watch. He got a watch. In fact, today I have that watch. I can remember him like it was yesterday, coming home from work. He was always tired. My dad taught me how to work. He taught me to leave everything on the line, the value that I'm now trying to teach and instill in my children. It's a value that I'm eternally grateful for. But I remember him coming home from work that day exhausted. I'm talking about hard, blue-collar working, just tired. He sat out on the porch as he always did and unlaced his work boots, these heavy steel-toed work boots that he had to wear all the time for protection. And then he grinned with this, almost like this, as they say, a Chester cat eating grin. I mean, this thing was just grinning from ear to ear. And he showed me his watch. Just a simple token. Just a simple token. But that watch left such a monumental move on my dad. Was it expensive? Probably not. They probably bought it in bulk. And they probably bought the watches in bulk for every employee that hit 20 years and gave it to him. Was maybe $300, $500. It wasn't expensive relative to watches. But it was recognition. It left such a mark on his life that I aspired to have that watch. It created a multi-generational memory in just a simple employee recognition. SurveyMonkey just before the pandemic said that 82% of Americans claim they're happier when they're recognized at work. 82%. Another study found that 63% of employees who feel recognized clearly state they're unlikely to look for another job. When my dad got that watch, he wasn't moving to another job. Yeah, he had been there 20 years. Yes, I get it. But he wasn't going anywhere else. He was content just because of that recognition. Another way you can recognize people is through a healthy corporate culture. Corporate culture. Man, I'm studying corporate culture right now more than I ever have because I'm seeing businesses with toxicity in culture. Maybe it's pandemic movement. I was actually listening to a doctor talk about how the pandemic has caused problems with with the corporate culture that we all aspired to have prior to the pandemic or pre-pandemic, and prior pandemic is kind of messed up. Yeah, that's part of it. So we need to build a healthy culture. We have to invest in that. We have to strengthen our employee relationships. We have to reduce management dependence, remove micromanagement as much as possible. We have to maintain motivation. The reality is that if we recognize our employees, our A players are more likely to stay. Now, in order to maintain our A players, we also have to embrace flexibility. Now, this is hard for me. I'm going to be candid. This is hard for me because I am a very rigid person. I set a path out and then I walk the path. I can remember when I was showing my pro forma to during the sale of my business to the individuals who were doing the research on it. I showed them a pro forma I had created 5 years earlier, and I missed the mark by about $30,000. We're talking over millions of dollars of production. I missed about $30,000 in my projection, and it was frustrating to me. And this person doing the due diligence started laughing, and he goes, "You're frustrated by the fact that you missed about $30,000?" I said, "Yes, I am." He goes, "Do you realize that 5 years ago, 60 months ago, you projected where you were going to be, and within $30,000 of a multi-million-dollar business, you're off? We're talking about less than 1%, and it ticks you off." I said, "Yeah, it does." I'm not a flexible person to say. I want something done in a very methodical, structured way. However, there was a Consumer Technology Association survey that was done back in 2021, and it said that 92% of the companies surveyed felt that flexible schedules and remote work were vital for retaining employees. We spoke about this earlier. We've got to create flexibility. We've got to be okay with employees having unlimited vacation. We've got to be okay with employees having the ability to control their schedule. Now, we have to set out the clear provision. We have to set out the rules and the guardrails to keep the employee and the company moving forward. I get that. That's a given. But we have to be flexible. When we think about flexibility with employees, we'll often hear work-life balance. It's a catchphrase. I've used that term many times in the fact that I don't like work-life balance. I don't think there's such a thing as balancing your work and your life. It's just impossible, in my opinion. What I do believe is we can blend the two together. And this is where flexibility comes into play. I'm reminded right now of a very dear friend and a colleague who has had some significant loss of family members, fathers, mothers, father-in-laws, brothers, in a very short time period. Just imagine if you lost 3, 4, 5 of your closest immediate family members within a 6-week period. If we were completely rigid and we were demanding peak performance with no empathy, someone who's going through a very hard time, a season of life like that, would not stay with the company. They would leave because family matters. Whenever we're dealing with A players, we have to be flexible. We have to rule with empathy. Brian Sullivan, the CEO of Wealth Source, I don't think I've ever met another CEO that rules with empathy to the level that I've seen him. In fact, he and I have multiple conversations about where this empathetic drive of his came from. It's very interesting. It's something that I'm candidly very weak in. I'm not a very empathetic person. I'm a very matter-of-fact, driven person. But friends, if we're going to retain our A players, the people that we need to drive the company forward on the mission that us drivers want, we're going to have to be flexible. We're going to have to rule with empathy. Another thing we can do to maintain our A players is we can host company events. In a 2018 Gallup poll, it found those who had a best friend at work were twice as likely to engage in their jobs. They were better at engaging customers. They produced a higher quality of work. They had greater sense of well-being. They're less likely to get injured on the job. This was in 2018. Studies are now coming out after COVID that even magnify that much greater. So in order for us to build that friendship, that camaraderie, that, we're willing to charge hell with a water pistol, as often said, we're going to have to connect the company with events. Now, if you're in a small company like Heritage Investors was prior to me selling it, I could simply have the office manager put everybody together, and we can have a pizza day, which I love pizza. We can have a pizza day. We could have an Easter sunrise service type of day, some sunrise day where we're celebrating Easter. At Christmas time, we can have, let's rally around and give gifts to the local charities. That's easy when you're in one location. But what about the businesses that are disjointed, that are in multiple time zones? Maybe you host a monthly networking event amongst the employees. Maybe it's a quarterly town hall where you get everybody together in town hall and you celebrate the wins. It's not to basically reset direction. The direction should be clear. It's to bring about that camaraderie, getting to know people. All of this is not for naught. Whenever we're trying to engage our employees, our top employees, we realize that if we invest in our employee engagement, it's cool. If we provide for professional development, yeah, we can do that, and it's good. If we recognize our employees, powerful, multigenerational impact. If we embrace flexibility, it is very, very good for the morale of our team, and we can host company events. But for someone like me, who is very analytical, and you perhaps who is very analytical, saying, well, that sounds all good and dandy, Justin, but what about EBITDA? What about profit? How does all this stuff impact bottom line? The good thing is that we can calculate that particular detail. We can calculate our retention rate. We can measure it. It's easy to do. You can do an annual calculation. What was your turnover? My challenge to you as you're calculating your turnover rate of your employees is, can you be much lower as a percentage of turnover than your industry? We have a client who is in a very unique auto manufacturing position, very unique. And the turnover rate for their industry is about 30% on an 18-month cycle. That's the number that is used. This particular client, about 4 years ago, was having a hard time maintaining employees. And as you and I both know, whenever we have employee turnover, it drags profitability. It kills us. Not only that, but it also drags team morale. It drags you as the business owner, me as a business owner, our managers. It just drags everything down. It's almost like that barnacle I was talking about a few episodes ago on the bottom of a boat. It just prevents the water from flowing across the hull as fluidly as it could. Whenever we implemented some of the tactics I mentioned before in this episode to try to boost the culture, to try to intentionally maintain employees, we reduced it to where we had zero turnover. Zero turnover. It took us about 36 months. We first shut the back door to where employees were not voluntarily leaving because of the culture, doing the exact same things I just mentioned. Then we selectively replaced our sub-performers. We began looking at our C players and replacing them for A or B players. As we began this replacement mode, our A players became more engaged. And we moved it to where they had extreme turnover down to where in the last 36 months, they have not had any turnover. Think about the last 36 months of your business. COVID. Have you had employee turnover? Is it greater than your particular industry? If so, just perhaps you may want to consider employing some of these tactics and tips from today's episodes. You say, Justin, man, this is a lot to deal with. This is why I often say every business needs a coach. Every business needs a value driver, somebody who's driving the value of the business, somebody who can sit back and look at it. And unfortunately, as small business owners, we find ourselves as that person. Friends, we have familiarity bias. We have creation bias. We have bias because it's our baby. This is where you need somebody to come alongside you and help you identify those weaknesses and build a game plan to drive the value of your company, realizing that you must maintain your A players. If you found today's episode helpful, hey, share it with somebody. Share it with another business owner. I promise every business owner is dealing with this particular topic. Every one of us. Every one of us, if you notice that. We are all in this together, friends. We are the backbone of our economic engine that we celebrate together, we business owners. Please share this with somebody else. Please leave us a review on whatever your podcast vendor is, whether it's Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio. And until next time, friends, I realize life is hard. This is hard. Dealing with employees is hard. It can be frustrating. It doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all go out and make it a great one.